sounds good. Thank you.
Oh, well, we may not want to go.
Yeah, yeah. It's a short, I think it's either over here or we do, right? Yeah. So, oh, he didn't call me back, so I yeah.
Welcome, everyone. Before we begin the meeting, we will have a prayer by Councilman Ken Hussey, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. Dear Lord, we gather this evening in the joy of the holiday season. And we also gather tonight with grieving hearts as we mourn the loss of our beloved Janice McMillan on December 8th. We ask for your wisdom and compassion as we conduct our business in this meeting. We ask for safety throughout the holiday season for all who will be traveling. Let us be thankful for all that has been bestowed upon our community. We give thanks for the opportunity before us to serve our citizens. Let us also pray for those who are in need this holiday season, that they also will find joy and peace. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
To order the Monday, December 18th, 2017 City Council meeting. Mrs. Powell, I want to say, I'm sorry.
Donaldson.
Mrs. Donaldson, roll call, please.
Fitzwater.
Here.
Graham.
Here.
Henry.
Here.
Hussey.
Here.
Kimna.
Here.
Mahalovich.
Here.
Prather.
Here.
Schreiber.
Here.
Ward. Here. Wiseman.
Here.
Thank you, Mrs. Donaldson.
You're welcome.
Item 3 is there a motion to adopt the agenda.
So move.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We have the agenda. I also like to recognize if there are any Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts with us in the audience this evening. Do we have any Scouts? Okay, we always enjoy that. Item 4, miscellaneous agenda items. Item A, we have a presentation of remembrance of Janice McMillan. So we just wanted to take a moment, like Councilman Hussey recognized in the prayer. And we do have a beautiful photo on the screen of Janice McMillan, who served as the director here for Planning and Protective Services for 30 years and became a staff person here in 1994 and was much more than just being on staff. She was certainly a friend to all of us here at the City of Jefferson, and she will be greatly missed. There was a wonderful service of her life over the weekend, and there were many city friends there in attendance, and we have a couple of proclamations that we gave her recently, and so I just wanted to make a mention of them. A lot of you know from Planning and Zoning, she was a great help there for Planning and Zoning, and we presented her along with Chairman Chris Jordan a proclamation at the Planning and Zoning meeting as she neared her retirement, and it talks about here her numerous programs and strategies that had been prepared under Janice's tenure, including award-winning 1996 Comprehensive Plan, the 2005 Central East Side Plan, an overhaul of the city's zoning in 2002, and implementation of an abandoned building registration program in 2012. And how the City of Jefferson and its citizens have been blessed by the years of dedicated public service put forth by Janice McMillan. Also, as we know, she retired just this past January, so we declared the 12th day of January 2017 as Janice McMillan Day, and that was quite a wonderful celebration of all of her accomplishments here at City Hall. So just wanted to take a moment to share how much she means to all of us here. And I also want to invite everyone tomorrow on Tuesday, December 19th, there will be a celebration of Janice's life at the Fountain of Hope, which is downtown near next to Saffy's. Janice was there when the dedication for Fountain of Hope was this summer, a hot summer day when we were very excited to have that dedication. Many of you have seen the Fountain of Hope, and what's so special about it is the fountain is made up of tiles, glass tiles, and each tile has a ribbon representing people who have dealt with cancer, survivors, or those who we have lost. And so it's a really beautiful fountain and a beautiful tribute to so many in our community. And who would have thought this summer, when Janice was there as part of her involvement with our Arts Commission and Arts Foundation, when we had that dedication, that here we would be giving her own tile at the Fountain of Hope. So that remembrance is tomorrow, December 19th, on Tuesday at 5:15 p.m., and we'll have a brief service there just to celebrate Janice and dedicate her tile at the Fountain of Hope. So certainly she will be missed by many of us, and I feel like when I heard the news, which was so sudden and so quick, I just felt like, wait, we're not finished. We haven't finished Capitol Avenue. You know, wait, Janice, we're not ready yet because we haven't finished all these things that you have started. And then I think a lot of these things wouldn't have even been started without her leadership within the city and department. So, you know, rather than being sad that she's not here to see the completion, I'm very thankful that she got us to the point we are today. And it's not just Capitol Avenue, it's so many things she's done within our city. And beyond that, though, the friend that she's been to so many of us, and I think my favorite photo of Janice, other than this one from her daughter's wedding just this past summer, would have to be the picture of her with Lauren Henry and Lauren's little baby. And the smile on Janice's face was just amazing, and it just shows, I think she was like a mother and friend to all of us here, and appreciate her so much. And I'll never forget the first trip when I was first elected to City Council in 2008, and how Janice was on our trip to Springfield, Illinois with the Chamber, and just getting to know her and all of her dedication. I mean, she was dedicated to those kind of trips and learning about planning from every city that she could, and bringing that here to Jefferson City. So I just say all of that to recognize her and show how much we appreciated her in her many years at the city, and that she continues to also impact the growth of our city and all that she's done in her lifetime. And as former city attorney Drew Hilpert said, I think he said it best when he said, the zoning in heaven just got better. So I thought I wanted to borrow that line, and he was here for the service, and I asked if I could use that, because that is so true, and I know that she is shining down on Jefferson City, and we're very thankful to her, and our thoughts and prayers go to her and her husband Jim and her daughter and her family. So I know I went on about that, but I just wanted to really share, and I know that council all feels the same, and all of us here. And certainly if anybody wants to add anything, if I missed any. It's hard to put her into words, and in fact I didn't think I'd be able to say any words, to be honest, so I'm thankful to the Lord for letting me at least get through that. So thank you all, and she will be greatly missed. Item B, recognizing December Outstanding Employee Diane Carey. So we have Mr. Kroll here for this moment of celebration.
And I will ask Diane to come up, and the director of the department, Sonny Sanders. So I wanted to read some of the comments that were in the nomination form. The complete form is on our website. So this is to recognize Diane Carey, City of Jefferson Administrative Technician, Planning and Protective Services, for receiving the City of Jefferson Outstanding Employee Service Award for December 2017. Some of the comments mentioned in the nomination form include the following, and I'm going to paraphrase some of these. Ms. Carey provides outstanding customer service, not only to citizens, but to the city employees as well. Ms. Carey, quote, does all the work and help with a smile and a congenial attitude, end quote. Ms. Carey has considerable knowledge of how multiple processes are performed within the city, as well as assisting in continual improvement to those processes. One example of a process improvement on which Ms. Carey performed and worked is related to the processing and reporting of building permits, resulting in improved and more timely data being available for decision-making. Ms. Carey offers suggestions for improving operations, resulting in service enhancements to employees and customers. Ms. Carey's follow-through on projects, tasks, and commitments is excellent. Ms. Carey manages her time well and ensures that tasks are covered before taking time off. Ms. Carey work is, quote, very professional because she is methodical, organized, takes great pride in producing a quality product. Plus, Diane is always friendly and helpful, even when dealing with difficult people, end quote. Ms. Carey, even when dealing with difficult people, end quote. Ms. Carey takes extra effort to ensure information which is put into various city informational and accounting systems is accurately and timely filed. Ms. Carey is, quote, diligent and conscientious about getting the job done and putting forth more effort to make sure the job is done correctly, end quote. Ms. Carey's significant contributions to the overall quality of life of the city are recognized and appreciated. So congratulations and thanks to Diane Carey, City of Jefferson Administrative Technician in the Planning and Protective Services Department, for receiving the City of Jefferson Outstanding Service Award for December 2017. And you have some fan club members here. You want to introduce them real quick?
Sure. I have my husband, Bill Carey, and then I have one of my daughters. I have 6 kids, but Heidi is here with her husband Jacob, and then Sebastian and Arden. So, and then I have some of my coworkers who have come.
Great. Welcome,
Well,
everybody.
fantastic,
Congratulations.
Mrs. Carey, and we appreciate your fine service to the city, and congratulations on this recognition, and we appreciate your extra service that you do for all of the city. We really appreciate everything. So I want to present you now with the city coin. So come on forward, and we'll get a picture. The family would like to come up, we can get a photo with everybody who's here. And coworkers too, can you come?
The whole fan club.
The fan club. The Diane fan club.
You want somebody to take a picture of this? We all appreciate it. We really.
Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Congratulations. Congratulations again, Diane and family. Item C now, we have a proclamation for Fred J. Otto, and we'll start with Chief Schofield.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. At an event earlier this evening over at the Jeff City Fire Museum, 911 East Miller, we honored the family of Fred J. Otto. Fred was a Lynn volunteer fire department member. 60 years ago today, on December 18th, 1957, was downtown when a fire broke out at the J.J. Newberry store, and he offered to help. And through that assistance and his hard work, they were able to keep the fire from spreading. Unfortunately, Mr. Otto succumbed to his injuries from smoke inhalation and died from that experience. So we wanted to take the opportunity to recognize this significant event and the sacrifice that the family made. We presented them with some mementos at the Fire Museum, and respectfully offer to you tonight an opportunity to grant them a proclamation to that effect.
Thank you, Chief Schofield, and I will read this proclamation, and I also thought, as I read it, if I know there's some family members here this evening as well, if they would like to come to the podium, and that way we could recognize the family members too. So if you all would like to come forward, and we had, and actually I think almost the half of the room is family, and we appreciate that. So we're thankful and would like to recognize everyone, and especially his 3 sons that are here with us this evening. And so there was a really nice ceremony and service that was held at the Fire Museum, which I think was very appropriate to have it there. And we are so thankful to your family and the sacrifice and all that you have had to go through, and how much we appreciate your father and his service to our citizens, and how important it is. And I know at the Fire Museum, the program included talk about that particular fire and other fires, whether they're in the downtown like this one was, or other places. And I know this one occurred 60 years ago, and we had one at our next door, the business next to ours, just a few years back. And I will never forget the feeling of watching the firefighters going into the building, knowing that the fire was there, and you watch them go in, and that moment as we just stand there and watch and think, wow, they're going in there and they're doing all of this for us, and to witness that. And I know that the firefighters do that on a daily basis, and they sacrifice for all of us. And there are no words to express how thankful we are. But I do want to share this proclamation and express how much gratitude we all have as a city council and as a community for your father, who made the ultimate sacrifice for all of us. And I think what we can do is continue to keep your family in our prayers, and also be thankful for such a wonderful family that you have here, and how you've all been so strong together and come together to be here for this, and how much we appreciate that. And I think as council members and we are tasked with making sure that we provide the fire department with all that we can as far as resources and all of those in public safety, and how important it is to take care of our fire department and our firefighters and make sure they have training and other appropriate measures as much as we possibly can. And I think this is a constant reminder for us. So I'll share this proclamation, and then I'd like for all of you to introduce yourself, and you may have a few words as well. So this proclamation reads, whereas Fred J. Otto served as honorably as a volunteer firefighter with the Lynn Volunteer Fire Department, and whereas Fred J. Otto died December 18, 1957 from injuries sustained at the Newberry store fire at 214 East High Street in Jefferson City, and whereas Fred J. Otto honorably served the people paying the ultimate sacrifices, and whereas Fred J. Otto is deeply missed by the fire service and the community, and whereas the people of the city of Jefferson wish to convey their deepest sympathy to the family and friends of Fred J. Otto, therefore I, Carrie Turgeon, Mayor and City Council of the City of Jefferson, do hereby recognize the supreme sacrifice made by Mr. Fred Otto 60 years ago today on December 18, 1957, in service to the community. So this is a tribute and token of our appreciation. So thank you. And we're thankful to have all three of you here, and if you'd like to say a few words.
Madam Mayor and Chief Schofield, thank you so much, and City Council members, for this remembrance, and we appreciate it. There was a beautiful event. Thanks so much to the Chief and his staff and the Museum Board for remembering our father. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm the middle son, Harry, Tom, Dick, but it is a legitimate Tom, Dick, and Harry. But this memory tonight actually created memories, because as an 8-year-old, you really don't have that many memories when your father passes. Your memories are quite limited. But this evening, I was very proud to be introduced as one of Fred Otto's boy, and also very proud to say that I was one of Martha Otto's boys also. So we thank you. I know Dad did not expect the outcome of that evening, but being dedicated as a public servant, I'm very, very proud of what my dad did, and very, very proud that Jefferson City and the fire department came forward to do this. Thank you for making memories for an 8-year-old boy that is now 68. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
These guys put the pressure on me. You know, I'm probably a man of fewer words than what these two are. I was only 4 at the time. I don't have a lot of memories, but the memories I do have come from them. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here, and I'd like to invite the entire family forward here in just a moment to take a photo as we present this proclamation, and to again express how thankful we are for people like your father with the courage and strength to run into danger when the rest of us are running away from it, and thank you for being here. And Chief Schofield, did you want to also add anything about the Fire Museum?
Just wanted to add that we are making this this display that was constructed for this evening a permanent part of the museum. So
Wonderful.
And we do have some museum board members here with us tonight. We have Jane Beadham, I believe, Steve Holtmeyer, Tim Young. Is there anybody else that I missed from the museum board here tonight? We also have some firefighters that came over and to support the family and were part of the event tonight. But if folks want to come over and see the display there, it's been, I think, a labor of love for a lot of our museum workers to build that, and it is available by appointment for anybody to come check it out.
Well, the Fire Museum is definitely a wonderful asset to our community. It was very fitting to have the ceremony there this evening, and I hope people will come and enjoy the display that is there in tribute and appreciate that. I also want to add a note that Mr. Fred Otto was a World War II vet, and we appreciate him being a veteran and his service not only to the fire department and our citizens, but to our country as well. And if we could, I know there's a large family, and we're happy to see that really from all over, not just from here in Jefferson City. I know some traveled from, I believe, Kansas City and beyond. So maybe, did you say St. Louis too? St. Louis and Kansas City. So if we could just have all of the family come up here, and then maybe the firefighters could get on the ends there, and we will present this proclamation and take a photo with the family. Thank you.
Any way you guys can kind of squeeze in on the sides there? This is just not going to be pretty. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3.
Thank you again to the Otto family. That was a nice tribute. Item 5, public hearings. We have item A rezoning. Mrs. Donaldson.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, changing, amending, and modifying the zoning map of the zoning code of the City of Jefferson by rezoning 1,120 square feet of land addressed as 1707 Stadium Boulevard from RS4 Single Family Residential to CO Office Commercial.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This property is located at the corner of Southwest Boulevard and Stadium Boulevard, as shown up on the screen there. There are two properties highlighted on the screen, and the rezoning really only deals with one of them, but I'll explain. The property located there on the corner is an office building with a parking lot located just immediately adjacent to the intersection. And the house that's located next door on Stadium Boulevard is owned by the same owner as the office building. The purpose of the request is really to accommodate a parking lot expansion into the rear yard area of the house to serve the office building. So this is the current zoning situation for the area, with the office building being zoned CO, an office commercial zoning district, and the house next door. The property has a split zoning on it. The house is zoned in RS4, which is a single family district, and the rear yard area is zoned a CO, an office commercial district. That zoning of the rear yard was put in place in 2009 in order to accommodate a parking lot expansion. They finally got around to laying some of the design out on paper and found that they needed a little bit more space of commercial zoning to accommodate the parking lot. So this council bill would rezone just over 1,100 square feet of property from an RS4 to a CO in order to accommodate that. It was recommended for approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission
at their November meeting. I'd be happy to answer any questions council may have.
All right, before we open the public hearing, does council have any questions for Mr. Barron? Okay, at this time we will open the public hearing portion. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on Bill 2017-93? Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. Patrick Kramer, Central Missouri Professional Services, 2500 East McCarty Street. I have with me Bert Deerhoff, the owner of the property. We're here to give you some information concerning the project, to answer any questions you may have. You already heard some of the specifics Eric mentioned of the case, but I wanted to give you a little history of Mr. Deerhoff and the property. Mr. Deerhoff opened his business in 1978 and built this office at 1301 Southwest Boulevard in the early 1980s. In 1997, he purchased the house east of his office at 1706 Stadium Boulevard. Over the years, the business has grown and continues to grow. As the employees are hired, their clientele grows, so does the need for parking. We looked at several options for parking for this development, one of which looked at demolishing the house at 1706 Stadium Boulevard. Mr. Deerhoff has also proposed using the access through the office building parking lot at 1305 Southwest Boulevard, which is next door, just south of Mr. Deerhoff's property. The negotiations for that were unsuccessful. After several meetings with city staff, it was determined that utilizing the proposed plan, a parcel division and a series of variances would be acceptable approach, as this would protect the single-family development along Stadium Boulevard. As Eric mentioned, this did go through planning and zoning. It also went through Board of Adjustment with 4 variances brought before the board. Those variances passed, and we believe we have a good plan in place for this property. With that, Mr. Deerhoff and I are available for any questions that you guys may have. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kramer and Mr. Deerhoff. Any questions at this time of council? Okay, is there anyone else here that would like to speak on 2017-93? Welcome.
So that you know, I get to watch these people drive in and out of that driveway. I feel sorry for them. I feel sorry for the other side of the highway up the street to get in and out for commercial business. One of these days we're going to have a major fatal accident there because people don't pay no attention. They go 35, 40 mile an hour through that intersection, and it's very cluttered. It's the best thing that will ever happen is knocking down that house and having parking for them, because it is a major business. It's been there a long time. That's in my ward, and I really would appreciate it if you allowed it to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, is there anyone else here that would like to speak on 2017-93? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing portion and take up the associated bill. Is there any further council discussion or deliberation? All right, roll call, please.
Graham.
Aye.
Henry.
Aye.
Hussey.
Aye.
Kimna.
Aye.
Mahalovich.
Aye.
Prather.
Aye.
Schreiber.
Aye.
Ward.
Aye.
Wiseman.
Aye.
Fitzwater.
Aye.
Bill passes. Thank you. Item 6, appointments by the mayor. We have several appointments to boards and commissions, and I'd like to say thank you for so many people who fill out the forms and who volunteer to serve on these. So, Mrs. Strope, would you like to give us an update?
Sure, thank you. So we have a number of, some of these are new appointments, many of these are reappointments. And we have 3 appointments to the Convention and Visitors Bureau, 1 to the Board of Electrical Examiners Review, 2 to the Historic Preservation Commission, 2 to the Board of Plumbing Examiners Review, and then we have a slate of 9 for the Human Relations Commission.
Thank you. Does council have any questions or comments on that, or do we have a motion to approve the slate of appointees?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item 7, presentations from staff, consultants, and invited guests. There are none this evening. Item 8, announcements by mayor, council, and staff. And I'll remind everyone that our council committee meetings are always on our calendar at jeffersoncitymo.gov. So you can certainly see our agendas and meeting times and locations. Are there any announcements by the 4 standing committees at this time? Okay, and check that, because I know with the holidays, some meetings have either been canceled or moved around. And I have a few of my own announcements. First, we had the Wreaths for Heroes on Saturday, and that was a very nice service. As always, in having a tradition carried on that was started by Lorraine Atkins, and this was the first year without her there, and it was nice to see the community come together and continue that tradition for Wreaths for Heroes. Also wanted to mention that on Wednesday last week that we had a tour of the riverfront area. We had several council members there, and it was a nice chance to look at the land known as Adrian's Island and see what the potential is. It's a project that's been talked about for several years, but now it's something that's within our reach thanks to the generosity of some donors, including B.J. DeLong and others who see the value in that. And for those of you that couldn't make it, I know there were some other work conflicts or different things that weren't able to. We'll make sure in the spring to do that again. And I will be sure to share pictures and information and get that out to the council and to the public so they can see what the tour was like. And we didn't have a quorum, but there were several people there, and we took pictures. And I know News Tribune did a nice article summarizing it as well, so if you didn't get a chance to see that, it's a very good summary of the tour. So that was exciting to see the potential there. I know we're a river city without access to our river from the capital side, so it's very exciting to see that there is potential, and the access would be a bridge from the Capitol, basically the Senate Garage area, from the Capitol over the railroad tracks down to the riverfront, and it would be ADA accessible and at-grade crossing, and it would be an area that, or it would be at-grade ADA accessibility, and the area that it lands is mostly dry and floods very rarely, as the newspaper article points out. So a lot of myths were looked at as far as people who think it's just not solid land. It's very solid and stable and full-grown trees, and the size of the land too, and the amount of acreage. When you think about 30 acres, that's a pretty substantial land, but since we don't see it, we don't realize the extent of it. So that was an exciting tour, and thinking about the future of riverfront access. And my last announcement is about the SOMO Power Hour Plunge, and there are 2 of us seated here that did the plunge. Councilman Mihaljevic, with his Olympic gear, went through the hazmat sprinklers, and I'm happy to report that we did reach our goal of $10,000, and for the first ever Special Olympics Power Hour Plunge to ever have in Jefferson City. So very proud of all those who donated to that, and you still can at somo.org if you didn't get a chance. But this is a kickoff to all the plunge season. They're still doing it at the lake and in Columbia and all the plunges around the state, coming in February and in the coming months. But it was nice to kick it off here in Jefferson City, most importantly as we get ready to welcome the new Special Olympics Training for Life campus, which will be the only one of its kind in the nation. So we want to support that here in Jefferson City, support our athletes by doing that. So we survived, right, Rick?
Congratulations on being a cheerleader. You did the 10,000. It was quite a big mark for the first time.
Well, thank you. And I think I wore my goggles around for a few days after just to keep fundraising, because we hadn't quite made it there yet, but I think we did now. And also Chief Schofield, who led the way through the hazmat sprinklers, but that was no big deal to you. You must do that all the time because you just walked through like it was nothing. Well, you did great walking through there, and I was prepared, though. I had my swim cap and goggles, and I think I was fine. My, floaties, just in case, on the arms, so we were in good shape. But that was a very, very cool event, so I hope it's the first of many annual ones to come. And are there any council announcements? All right, I know we have a staff announcement. Mr. Sanders?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As part of our Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing program, we are working on a plan to help ensure that all the neighborhoods in the community are places of opportunity with fair housing. We will be having two public meetings to gather information at the first of the year, one on January 3rd here in this council chambers between 4 and 6, and one at the Dorothy Parks Community Center the following day, the 4th, between 4 and 6. We also will have on our website, the main homepage for Jefferson City, a link to a survey that people can fill out. And I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Sunny? All right, any other staff announcements this evening? Okay. Item 9, presentations from the gallery on specific bills or resolutions. And we do have 2 signed up. We have Mr. Art Hernandez to speak on the historic preservation ordinance. Welcome, and thank you for your service to the Historic Preservation Commission.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I come to you today, again, to speak on the same topic that I've been presenting for the past 2.5 years. The need for an understanding of the historic preservation ordinance. I understand very little about the economic impact that this would have on the city. I don't pretend to be an economist or someone with a great depth of knowledge about what this will mean to real estate prices and futures in the future. I don't think anybody can. But I can explain to you a few things that I have found in my research and in my investigations. There are 2 proposals, 2 recommendations before you. One of them, they're almost exactly identical. One of them from Planning and Zoning, which recommends a 75-year ordinance review threshold, and the one that came from my commission and my fellow commissioners from the Historic Preservation Commission of 50 years. I understand the hesitation. I understand the real estate and the realtor board's concerns. But again, we can't predict the future. I can tell you that if you were to just Google, like I did for the past 15 minutes, realtors and historic preservation, the first 17 pages have nothing but positive reviews about how realtors can use historic preservation and historic properties to promote and expand their businesses, how those properties can promote and expand the tax base and the population surplus, to paraphrase Ebenezer Scrooge. Historic properties are important, not just to this community, but to all communities, but especially to this community. This city is not just historically important to Missourians, it's historically important to the nation. This was the first true capital west of the Mississippi. It was home to the first real prison west of the Mississippi. It was the home of famous people, infamous people. These buildings are important. This is not just about demolition. It's about preservation. To put the burden of these buildings and the history of these buildings and the stories that these buildings can tell and the people that these buildings can attract to the wayside because of concerns that none of us can predict. I've been tasked with preserving the historic buildings of the city of Jefferson. So I'm going to tell you, I think that's foolish. That's my opinion. Because I'm tasked with protecting those buildings. I'm tasked with preserving their history. And to present to you and to the public that those buildings are the most important things that you have here in the city. Because those buildings represent people, and your story and my story, and the future. We've spent so much time worrying about other buildings and protecting those buildings. And this city has gone through lots of money to deal with those issues. This is of the same value and of the same venue. And protecting those buildings is what I'm tasked to do, and I'm telling you, please protect them. I'm asking, as the chair of the Historic Preservation Commission, that you consider the 50-year threshold. There's buildings that are worth it between 50 and 75 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of council? Thank you.
Thank you.
And next we have Mr. Brian Bernsketter to also speak about 2017-105. Welcome.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, members of the council, Brian Bernsketter here on behalf of the Jefferson City Area Board of Realtors. Most of you hopefully got a letter from some of our members, your constituents, talking about their concerns with the proposed demolition ordinance, so I don't want to go over them too much. But I did want to point out a couple things that are, maybe to illustrate their concerns. One of the things in there talks about plans for preservation. So as a condition of getting a permit to demolish, you would have to come up with some sort of plans to preserve notable features of a home, which is, and generally if you go through one of these homes and you have items that you can sell, you're going to sell them. But if you don't have a way to sell them and the commission says you have to preserve them, then you're left with sort of a scenario in which you're basically storing stuff on behalf of the city. And I guess so, if there was say a staircase that was notable, so the commission could say, as a condition of the permit, you have to take this staircase and preserve it. Okay, where am I going to put it? Am I supposed to store it in a facility, for years until someone comes along? Is the city going to store it? I think there's just some real practical implications, and you can go all the way down even to light fixtures. I mean, it's still the same. How was the public's interest served by preserving that in a storage shed, which I think is one of the situations that you may end up with if there's no one there to buy it. So I think that's a concern that we have. The other one that was addressed, we appreciate that, is just some clarification on the review process. An economic return from one person to the next is going to be largely subjective. Some folks may say that a 1% return is on rehabbing a property is reasonable. Others may say it's 20%. And I think both of those people would be right given whatever circumstances that they're in. You think about some of the other things that could cause a problem in terms of asking for an economic return about whether or not a building can be rehabilitated. Say you have a not-for-profit and they need to tear a building down. Well, there's no economic model, there's no rate of return that matters to a not-for-profit. It's all about serving the constituency that they have to serve. So you can't put that on them. And not to say that they would, but it's certainly a condition that they could, and I think it just illustrates one of the things that could be fixed to make this ordinance better. And the other thing I would just caution you, all of these things seem in the abstract to be not that big of a deal, but if it's your property that they put these conditions on, that's a really big deal to you. You may not have known when you came across this property that there would be any sort of circumstances that prevent you from doing what you wanted to do with it. And so that one property owner is going to be bearing a public benefit for everyone, unbeknownst to them and at great cost. So I would just caution you to make these changes methodically and, and ensuring that they're not going to be undue burdens for the taxpayers and citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions at this time? Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
All right. Item 10, consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Any further discussion? Councilman Graham?
I know we have some members from the Capital Region here, and I wanted to hear a little bit more about D with the permissive use of right-of-way.
Okay.
So I know we have Gasper here. Can you just come and maybe tell us what's additional we're adding to that area?
What would be the best way? I'll look to Ryan. Should we take a little bit of testimony and if there's any staff input? What would you
I think
propose?
that's a fine way to approach it.
Okay, so we'll start with Gasper, and welcome,
Okay.
Mr. Calvaruso.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Councilman Graham, what exactly would you like me to?
What are you going to be adding to that area there?
Well, I guess there was already a presentation here some time ago with regards to the plans around the roundabout with the artwork that was donated by Capital Region. And there was a previous idea of some other signage around the roundabout. Since the time of the approval and since the time of implementation, there was a decision made by Capital Region that we would like to have our logo placed on that roundabout. And so our reason for presenting here today is to change the variance so that we can proceed with the existing presentation.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Calvaruso. Any further discussion or questions? Okay. Any other, I guess we don't necessarily need any staff report on it, so should we just take up consent agenda? Would council be comfortable taking it up as a whole? Okay. So we have a motion and a second, and any further discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that is unanimous, and thank you again for being here. Item 11, bills introduced. We have 2017-95.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute a contract with Houck Transit Advertising.
Mr. Marash?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As the clerk indicated, this is a contract with, it's pronounced Hawk Transit Advertising, kind of spelled a little strangely. But you see a dollar amount there, and it's kind of an estimated dollar amount or based on previous years, but this is actually a revenue contract for the city. So what this company does is sell advertising on city transit buses, and what we do is provide the frames for that, some of the advertising. It's kind of a turnkey service. They go out, find the clients, develop the advertisement, come in during our operation hours and install those. So there's really very little manpower on the city's part to do this work. So this is a 3-year contract, the way it's structured now, with the opportunity for renewal, 2 1-year renewals, and of course on the 3 years the city could cancel at any time, giving some notice in accordance with the contract. Be happy to, I guess the revenue guarantee is at least $7,000 a year, but the last 3 years have averaged about $20,000.
Great. Any further, any questions or deliberation? Okay, thank you. 2017-96.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute a $553,402.21 agreement with CSE Enterprises LLC for the ABB pump station replacement project.
Mr. Marash?
Thank you. As clerk indicated, construction contract. This is CSE Enterprises. They're out of Rolla, Missouri. We took bids for replacement of the ABB. We refer to it as the ABB pump station. It's over at the airport. If you drive in, that's where it's located. You'll see it elevated there in front of the airport. But basically, not only ABB, but it does serve as the pump station for Holt Summit transmission coming into the city for the waste line. So this is a wastewater project. Pumps the waste from that station to the plant. The current one's a little over 40 years old, I believe, and this would replace that. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilman Hussey?
Mr. Marash, was this a planned replacement, part of our master plan on things?
Yeah,
or was this kind of a surprise?
This is something that if our bids came in adequate on other projects, that we could tag on at the end, and so that has happened. We got actually a very good bid on this project. If you look at the bid tab, we're a little concerned with that because of the low number, but we did contact other clients of this firm, and they have done this similar type work for them. The contract, we even call the contractor, and you sure you haven't missed something? And their basic deal is they feel they can do the project without constructing a temporary part of it. So, and they've had success doing that in other projects.
Thank you. Any further questions? All right. 2017-97.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute an agreement with Rehagen Electrical Contracting Incorporated in the amount of $97,938 for the Christie Building Standby Power Project.
Mr. Morash?
Thank you. Again, another construction contract, Rehagen Electric here in Jefferson City. Basically, this would install a generator for City Hall. We've talked about this about a couple years ago. We had MECO Engineering evaluate what it would take, whether we could need a new generator, or could we somehow tap into the generator at the police department. They felt it was best to go this way. We're on different type of power, and I'm not an electrical engineer, but there was a difference in the, I'm trying to find the word, the type of power utilized by the Larry was here. He could tell us. But anyway, we bid the project. It's $97,938. The funds would come from the building. I think it's called the Building Sinking Fund. We've been putting money aside for roofs and other improvements to buildings, and this would come out of that pool of money.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. Thank you. 2017-98.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, vacating and discontinuing a portion of an alley right-of-way in the 900 block of Adams and Jackson Streets.
Mr. Morash?
Thanks. This would vacate a portion of an alley, as clerk indicated. It's over near Hickory Street Park, I believe it's referred to. It's between Adams and Jackson Street, 900 block. The resident along this area has requested this vacation. Part of it's already been vacated in the past. Kind of a hodgepodge of vacations, and this would clean that up as well.
Any questions? 2017-99.
An ordinance authorizing the mayor and clerk to execute an agreement between the City of Jefferson and Rich and Associates Incorporated for professional services related to the parking division.
Mr. Morash?
Thank you. Again, a professional service agreement. It's Bar Engineering, or excuse me, I'm on the wrong one. Rich and Associates. This is for continuation of our parking study in the downtown area. Now the agreement's less than the 25,000 limit for the city administrator. However, it's a continuation of another agreement. So what will happen with this contract, they'll go ahead and look at 5 different sites downtown for a potential parking garage, and then narrow that down to the 2 best and do some more detailed estimates on those two best. So there'll be a series of discussion about that. They'll also do a pro forma based on the 2 best sites, meaning they'll kind of evaluate the budget and determine what the cost benefit is of these structures.
Great. Any questions? Thank you. 2017-100.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute an agreement with Bar Engineering in the amount of $149,600 for the design of the Mesa, Shell Ridge, and Chickadee Stormwater Project.
Mr. Morash?
Thank you. Again, like the clerk indicated, professional service agreement with Bar Engineering here in Jefferson City. This is really kind of 2 projects, not necessarily listed that way in the title, but about approximately half of that is to build, actually do development plans to construct 3 projects, one at Mesa, Shell Ridge, and another one at Chickadee. The other half of the money is actually for some more detailed modeling and conceptual design in 2 areas of town. One is the Satinwood, Cedar Hill, Timber Trail area, where we've had a lot of flooding, and so they would evaluate that and do some modeling and give us some options of what could be done there to solve those issues, or what could be solved and what couldn't be solved maybe. The other one is Douglas Street area, another area that's been long complaint history, much needed. It's maybe not obvious exactly what would be done there, so they'll also do a lot of modeling in that area to hone in on what could be done to solve some of those issues.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilman Hussey?
Matt, what's the turnaround time on the modeling piece on the second half that you talked about?
Well, there is some timeframes in the contract, but we would like to get the construction phase out to bid fairly quickly. Bar Engineering, we're actually very lucky to have them in the city. They have a small office here, but they're a larger company that does a lot of environmental work, and they've done a lot of wastewater projects. So we expect them to be able to turn that around maybe springtime-ish.
Is that on the Mesa, Shell Ridge, and Chickadee projects?
We would hope both, sir.
Oh, even the
yeah,
Satinwood,
that would be my goal.
Douglas. Okay.
Now, do I always achieve those? Maybe not, but we're going to push them to give us, something. Probably be some meetings in there, could drag it out a little bit with the residents, but we would like to know have some idea of what could go on there.
And then do you anticipate the funding source for the construction phase to have come from that additional $750,000 we allocated, or is this coming out of the capital improvement sales tax, or?
Well, we're treating it kind of as one lump sum of money, but we would anticipate the construction for the 3 projects out of that pool of money that's already been budgeted. And I think we said, I want to say it was $850,000 total, something like that. Some for design, some for construction projects, and then some for the staff, the added staff, which we're well into. I think we've hired all those folks by now as well.
So it's safe to say that we wouldn't do all of these projects without the additional allocation. So,
Yeah, that's safe to say, sir.
Thank you.
Any further questions? All right, 2017-101.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri pertaining to stormwater floodplain management.
Mr. Marash?
Thank you. This ordinance basically modifies our city code, really the floodplain aspects of the city code. SEMA came and gave us what they call a community assistance visit about a year ago or so. It's really more or less basically an audit of what our floodplain code was and kind of our permitting that we've been doing. They found a couple items they would like us to update our code with. So in doing so, basically it's centered around the administrative procedures as it involved floodplain code. But we took the opportunity, as you look at the code, we've X'd a bunch of it out and just basically reordered it as well, just to make it a little simpler to follow, and then also included these administrative procedures. Happy to answer any questions. We're supposed to have this adopted by, I think it's mid-January, so we're just kind of here at the tail end of it, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. And I did want to take just a moment because I know on our sign-in sheet, we do have Mary Ann Reuter here who's going to, you have wastewater under the 3-minute slot under other topics. So I want to make sure you weren't here to talk about any of these 2 previous ones, correct? Okay. Just want to make sure I didn't miss you there. Thank you. All right. 2017-102.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri submitting an amendment to the Charter of the City of Jefferson relating to the Fireman's Pension Fund to a vote of the citizens of the City of Jefferson.
Mr. Molman?
Thank you. This ordinance would place in front of the voters of the city a question to amend the charter of the city to eliminate the Fireman's Pension Fund and its board of directors. Hopefully the council remembers previous this year, the council approved transferring the funds and functions of the firefighters' pension fund and administration of that fund to Missouri Loggers, which handles retirement for probably a majority of local government employees throughout the state. So when that happened, what we are left with is the Fireman's Pension Fund and its board of directors, particularly its board of directors, as a body that has neither any funds nor authority anymore. So this is really kind of a cleanup of the charter to reflect the reality of the system that we're operating under, get rid of the board and make sure that it is clear that the firefighters' pension fund is administered through loggers as opposed to this essentially body that really doesn't do anything or have any money to do anything anymore. Did want to note that this would not affect the current tax levy that is collected to fund firefighters' pension. It's just essentially just getting rid of language in the charter that calls for the existence of a board whose functions are now being carried out by loggers. I think it's fair to say that this is a technical change.
Thank you. Any questions of council? All right. 2017-103.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri submitting an amendment to the Charter of the City of Jefferson relating to the office of City Prosecutor to a vote of the citizens of the City of Jefferson.
Mr. Molman?
Also a change to the charter. This ordinance would place in front of the voters a question as to whether or not to change the current position of city prosecutor from a current elected position to an appointed position. Like the firefighter pension fund ordinance previously, a version of this ordinance was previously on the city council agenda this summer and was moved to the informal calendar. And 102, 103, 104, I think it's fair to say that those were moved to the informal calendar without ever being taken up on the merits. And so these three are appearing in front of the council again. One difference, or there's actually a couple differences between this version and the version that the council saw previously. The first difference is that this ordinance, if approved by the voters, or this charter change, if approved by the voters, would not go into effect until April of 2019. That would allow the current prosecutor to fulfill his full term that he was elected to in 2017. And so this would only make that change after the expiration of the current term of the current prosecutor. Also, the previous version of this charter amendment specified that the city council could appoint an assistant or associate city councilor to act as city prosecutor. We simplified that a bit and call for the Department of Law to fulfill the duties of the office of city prosecutor if the council so chooses to do so. The other option that the city council would have under this charter amendment would be to appoint a private attorney outside the city to fulfill the duties of the office of city prosecutor. So essentially, it gives some flexibility to the mayor and city council to decide which course, whether to go in-house or outside counsel for the office of city prosecutor. If the ordinance approves, this would go on the April 3rd, 2018 ballot, but not to go into effect until April 2019.
Thank you, Mr. Molman. Any questions of council? Councilman Graham?
Yes, Madam Mayor, and to my colleagues, I just want to let you all know that I do have some concerns about this proposed bill, and I've had the conversation with the bill sponsor as well as city staff about this proposed bill, and I just hope that we all really look at this bill and ask a lot of questions because there is a lot of red flags that's brought up when I look at this. One of the things that I was told is that the cost for this position would be reduced as well too. But when you're outsourcing and hiring private attorneys and things like that, there's I can't see how this would be a cost savings to the city. And so that's just one of the concerns in which I have. So I know we're not voting on it tonight, but in 2 weeks we will bring this back. And like I said, I will have a lot more concerns and questions about this proposed bill. So,
if I may, and I just want to point out for the council's benefit that staff is making a recommendation, or not making a recommendation, but is pointing out that this could potentially offer cost savings. Staff certainly would not make a promise that this would definitely lead to cost savings. It's essentially a process of competitive proposals could lead to introduction of lower rates that could lead to overall cost savings, or taking it in-house it's a potential. There's nothing to say that this could be more work than what the current office can currently handle, and there may need to be either increases in salary or additional staff. I just want to make it very clear, we're not saying that this will definitely lead to a cost savings, but it does offer a potential for cost savings.
Councilman Graham?
Because I'm seeing that the city prosecutor and the judge are seeing about 17 to 20,000 cases a year, and if we bring that in-house to the law department, that alone tells me that we're going to have an additional person to do those duties with 17 to 20,000 cases a year alone. And so that's, like I said, that's not just the only concern that I have, but I look forward to the discussion in 2 weeks.
All right.
Thanks.
Any questions? Councilman Mihaljevic?
One of the questions that have been posed is, I think I remember in testimony of the fact that how would the city, being the own prosecutor, be fair, and would it still be impartial, sort of a little kind of a hands-on? So the question is, you posed 3 or 4 different ways of selecting a prosecutor, but maybe in the minds of some that maybe we should have that up front. We should have, say, a prosecutor will be selected in this manner, so that the voters would know if they passed that, that they would know that we had a structure for impartiality and fair play and whatever other concerns that came forward from the podium the last time this was brought forward. Do you have any thoughts on that, how we would proceed with that, or?
There's always a tension between addressing concerns that came up and simplicity in administration, and so you always have to find a balancing act. I can speak, having looked into the issue, that there's probably a pretty wide range on how other cities, constitutional charter cities, who are really our peers in this, on matters of the charter, how they do that. Some cities just say the Department of Law shall be the city prosecutor, and then other cities will have a process where it's a appointed council that goes through, essentially a bidding process and then an appointment process through the council. And so I think what this particular amendment attempts to do is give some flexibility to the council to address its needs for that office, but certainly recognizing that it adds a layer of complexity that that may not be desirous for this position. There are certainly measures that you can take to vet it through the public process more. You could implement those types of processes. You could implement some sort of outside commission to make a recommendation. Something maybe perhaps similar to a Missouri plan where there's recommendations that are made by the greater legal community, and there's also participation from non-legal participants. Because we're a charter city, we have lots of flexibility, and so if there are different additional ideas on how to handle this particular issue that any council member would like for us to explore, we're certainly open to do that. I think in this area, the world's kind of our oyster, and we can figure out what works best for the city of Jefferson. If it's not this or what we're doing currently, there's lots of things that you could do to open up that process and maybe take a little different tact. The only thing you would want to caution is making it too complicated so that it's hard to understand for the general citizen. But that's a balancing act.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councilman Prather?
I just want to concur with Councilman Graham's comments that we need to proceed with caution, especially whenever there's a change as such to the city charter. We shouldn't take that lightly. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Okay. Item 2017-104.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, submitting an amendment to the Charter of the City of Jefferson relating to term limits on the office of council member to a vote of the citizens of the City of Jefferson.
Mr. Molman.
Thank you. Once again, an ordinance to propose a question to the voters of Jefferson City to amend the charter, which would change the terms of the charter relating to term limits in the office of council member. What this proposed charter amendment would do, essentially what we have now is once a person serves 2 terms on the city council as a council member, the charter imposes what I'm calling a lifetime ban. So essentially a person serves those 2 terms and then is forever ineligible to hold the office of city council member. Sorry, 4 terms, sorry about that. Forever, well, you could. Once they fulfill the full term, or the full set of terms, they are no longer eligible to hold that office. What this amendment does, it changes that from a lifetime ban to a, I think they're popularly called a cooling off period, in which there would be a certain amount of time that would have to lapse before that person could then re-serve on the city council. In this particular case, it's 23 months. 23 months is essentially a full term. It buys us a little time because it's not always a full 24 months between elections, terms. And so I think the theory behind the charter amendment is that it accomplishes a lot of the goals that term limits were originally thought to address by preventing someone from being a perpetual incumbent and requiring some turnover in the office of city council member, so that way there are new incumbents, and so that way one person doesn't forever hold the electoral advantage of being an incumbent and getting some new ideas and new faces on the city council with that turnover, but still not limiting the ability of someone who wants to serve as city council for more than 4 terms, giving them the opportunity to do that over the course of their lifetime.
Thank you. Any council questions or comments? Okay. 2017-105.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri amending Chapter 8 Buildings and Building Regulations pertaining to review of demolition permits by the Historic Preservation Commission and establishment of public hearing procedures.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This bill would amend the city code by establishing more stringent review requirements and processes associated with proposals to demolish buildings within the city of Jefferson. It is a topic that has received a fair amount of interest from members of the community. There have been a number of different meetings, public meetings that have been held over time regarding this. It's appeared in front of the Public Works and Planning Committee a couple times. There was a city council work session that was dedicated to this topic that was held on May 22nd of this year, and it has appeared in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Historic Preservation Commission. Within your packets, along with the bill, is a staff summary of the different contents of the bill with a little bit of the reasoning behind each of those items. And then also a staff update, which includes recommendations by the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Historic Preservation Commission. So both of those bodies voted some recommendations that are different than what's contained in the bill, and I'll get to that here in a moment. And also a packet of public comments that have been received by staff to date. So written comments that have been compiled and placed in your packets. As I mentioned, this item was the topic of a city council work session on May 22nd of this year. And so I went back and I pulled one slide from that presentation that I wanted to show you, just to kind of bring us back to that point. We did a fair amount of research on this topic, the topic of historic preservation as it relates to demolition. What we found, looking at other cities across Missouri, a few outside Missouri, and what we found was that no two cities really deal with it in the same way. But in general, you can divide them into one of 2 different types of processes, which are shown on the screen. One is a general review process, largely advisory in nature, that cannot prevent demolition. And so the first one there, the general review process, is what the city of Jefferson has in place right now for its historic preservation demolition process. And then number 2 there, what I refer to as a certificate of appropriateness process, so something that's really associated with a decision as to whether a structure can be demolished or not. The certificate of appropriateness process is more like what is being proposed to you this evening with this council bill. It is a process that, when you look at other communities, is largely based on designated historic districts, so areas that cities have looked at found to be historic and designated them as such, and put the various controls in place, including demolition. But also, regarding a review of construction projects sometimes. And the main difference between the process 1 and 2 is that the second one can prevent demolition. So the city, through that process, can say no, that a structure cannot be demolished. And again, a common theme is that appeals, these items are often heard by the Historic Preservation Commission, and appeals to their decisions would go to the City Council. And so the bill that is placed in front of you this evening is a tiered process of review for demolition proposals. One tier being proposals that would go through what we've termed a historic preservation demolition review process. And then the second tier being a historic preservation demolition clearance process. So really the words review versus clearance. And so the first process there would apply to local landmarks, so structures and properties that have been designated a landmark within the city, structures located within National Register districts, and also any structures that are between 50 and 100 years old. The second process there would apply to any structures that are located within a local historic district, so a district designated locally as being historic, and then also any structures that are older than 100 years. The primary purpose, I think, of the first process there, the review process, is to have a period of time where structures that are proposed for demolition have to wait before being demolished. And so there's a timeline associated with the review, 75 days or 2 meetings, 2 months, the Historic Preservation Commission, where any denials by Historic Preservation would result in a delay of the issuance of the permit until that time period is passed. So its purpose is really to allow people to explore other options prior to demolishing a structure. It cannot prevent the demolition of the structure, but allows people to take a look at it and, barring anything else, at least to document some of its attributes before the structure is demolished. The purpose of the clearance process is to preserve the structure, and so it is much stronger. The timeline associated with that process is applications would be reviewed on a month-to-month basis by the Historic Preservation Commission, very similar to how cases are heard by the Planning and Zoning Commission, so that they're typically dealt with the next meeting after they're applied for. But do have the ability to be continued on to another meeting for cause. That process would also involve a public hearing, so staff would actually post a sign on the property to identify that it's been proposed for demolition, and then hold a public hearing in front of the Historic Preservation Commission where anyone could voice their public comments on the topic. And again, denials by the Historic Preservation Commission could be appealed to the City Council, again with a similar public hearing taking place in front of this body. As I mentioned earlier, the Planning and Zoning Commission and Historic Preservation Commissions both made some recommendations regarding this bill. One of their recommendations focused on the year range, with the Planning and Zoning Commission recommending that the threshold for the demolition clearance process be reduced from 100 years down to 75 years. And the Historic Preservation Commission made the recommendation that that threshold be reduced from 100 years down to 50 years. And then they both recommended a specific penalty section within for the purpose of demolition permits. So someone demolishing a structure without a permit be subject to essentially a higher penalty than a normal code violation. As mentioned, there was a staff update incorporated into the council bill packet. Staff incorporated the penalty sections as recommended by both bodies into the bill. So the bill does contain a a specific penalty provision for this, or for relating to demolition permits, but did not incorporate a change in the year recommendation. So it's still listed as 100 years, and that is, of course, the council has the ability to amend that to whatever year range it may desire. Some of the review criteria that would be considered when demolition proposals appear in front of the Historic Preservation Commission are shown up on the screen. It's a tiered structure also. With the top two items there, the first one, or the top two items dealing with really historic criteria, and then the area below the line dealing with other factors. And so the review criteria are very similar to the criteria that exists for National Register nominations. So literally we went down that list and listed essentially the same criteria. And then also criteria relating to the visual impact on streetscapes and other historic properties. So when a building is taken out, obviously that could have some impact on surrounding properties. And if that area is historic, that is a very, very notable type of thing to be considered. And then the criteria at the bottom of the screen, if a structure is found to be a notable structure, essentially if it's found to be historic based on the review criteria at the top, then there's other things to consider, such as what kind of shape the structure is in, where it is located, if it's located within an area that's been designated as a redevelopment area by city plans, if it's located in an area that is really incompatible, let's say an area developed commercially as opposed to its a historic residence, and some other items there. And so a structure could be found both historic and then also suitable for demolition because of some of the criteria on the bottom of the screen there. A few other items. The process is separated from actual application or issuance of a demolition permit. So this clearance process can be applied for before, for example, a property transfer occurs. This is important because it could affect actual property transfers, whether a structure could be demolished after that property transfer takes place. And so the length of approval for clearance would be 1 year, and if they do not apply for a demolition permit within that time, they would have to reapply for clearance. And also, the Historic Preservation Commission would have the ability to place conditions on structures that are approved for demolition clearance. And if the applicant wants to disagree with those conditions, the appeal would be to the City Council. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions the council may have. This item is scheduled for a public hearing in front of this body at the January 2nd council meeting at 6 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Barron. Councilman Mahalovich?
I think our person that testified has left the room, but one statement is property is a big deal, and it is a big deal. The reason why it's a big deal is we have a particular process in the city that is very stringent in terms of our Planning and Zoning Commission. At least two of us have served on that Zoning Commission, and several of us have been the liaison. If you know how the structure of that, it's structured not only by ward representation, but a very methodical process. And it is very open. It has all the things that I would fear if I was not in favor of this, is that it's not an open, closed process. There's not well thought out. It has all those elements. So we turn ourselves to this, which I generally support. And I was good to hear that Mr. Barron had mentioned these criteria right here, because as I see it, it'll be up to us to overturn or to support what the commission says. So it'd be as important to me to know that the commission itself has the qualities that our planning and zoning does, that they understand these criteria, and to an extent have training and are knowledgeable in giving us a recommendation for which we're going to be asked to render a decision on. So just as the planning and zoning information comes to us, I take their recommendation in very high regard, because I know the deliberation and the balance of that committee. I would expect the same level of confidence if it came from the HPC. So in the hearing and in further testimony, I'll be keen to hear the kinds of criteria they use, whether or not it's actually suggested by the state or other commissions, and how it is that they deliberate that as it comes to us. Because when it comes to us, property is a very important thing. And so that was one big deal with an extension, with a constituent that approached me about this. The other issues that I think that are before us is kind of maybe our own personal, whether it's 50, 75, or 100, but I generally support this, and with a few maybe changes, I can vote for it.
Thank you. Councilman Prather?
Mr. Barron, do you have any comments on what Mr. Brunskitter had alluded to earlier about historical nature of items within the household that must be held on to?
And so that, I might lean on my counterpart beside me, Jamie Abbott, who is the primary staff support for the Historic Preservation Commission. But my understanding is that it's an item of high concern for that body, is what is going to be happening to the fixtures, the things that are very easily saved. In most cases, I think, when speaking of stairway, you might get away from that a little bit, but I think a lot of the fixtures is an item of high concern, and I think that they generally want to be able to require those fixtures to be saved rather than be disposed of along with the demolition, and so that was an item that was incorporated within the text. It could be stricken, but it's one of the, there's another section within the text that requires for interior photographs of the structure. That's a section that's been in place for a number of years. I believe it was incorporated into the city code in 2013. And the purpose of those interior photos is to judge some of the fixtures and condition of the structure. So with it being such a high item of concern, felt it appropriate to fit it into the bill.
Councilman Hussey and then Schreiber.
Can I follow up on that same question? Was that language, has that language been in this proposal throughout its entirety about saving historical fixtures? That wasn't like new language that we just added in the last couple months or anything, was it?
It was, so this bill was presented to Public Works and Planning on June 22nd, and so that's, I believe, the first time that it was seen. So prior versions of the demolition ordinance, no, did not include that. I don't think they did, no.
Well, but it's on the application form. All right.
If I can add,
Yeah.
if I may add to Eric's comments about currently the Historic Preservation does make the recommendation to all demolition applicants to, as what I call upcycling, recycling fixtures, and suggesting to maybe nonprofit organizations, because a lot of these fixtures are rare to find, 6-panel doors, 3-panel doors, etc., that could benefit other properties in our community. So that's how I kind of view it, is that it's a recycling of the property materials.
Yeah, appreciate that, and I guess I would just add that we've spent a lot of time, it feels like, on this discussion, and I know that I think when Public Works had this last, we kind of had gone through, we had staff kind of rewrite some things to get in greater conformity. I mean, the original proposal from HPC was talking about a defined geographic boundary and setting an age restriction. We kind of learned that that was probably not a proper way, or potentially was going to open us up to some litigation. And I feel like as a council and a committee, we sort of worked with the interested parties to get to a final product at Public Works, which is, I think, what is being presented to us. and the decision was made to say, well, let's just send this back to planning and zoning and the HPC for one more look by those bodies as well. Now, we can probably have a conversation again on 50, 75, 100. I would be of the opinion we had that conversation, and that maybe when we got to the 100, that those voices had input. And I felt like at that Public Works meeting, when we reached that point, that we were sort of people were comfortable with it. It wasn't the perfect proposal for all the groups, but it wasn't the worst proposal either. And I know in a couple weeks' time at a public hearing, we might relitigate that age restriction and some of these details. I would just throw it out to say that we've kind of done that, and I felt like we went through a good process. I'm not surprised by some of the age modification recommendations by those two bodies. But again, that was the original proposal from HPC, had that 50-year geographic boundary, and we worked it to a point. I don't think P&Z initially had a recommended policy to us, and so I guess sometimes I like the process, and I felt like, again, we worked through a good process. We worked through a lot of these issues. I'm concerned when, penalty flags are sort of thrown at the last minute on language that's been in there for 5 or 6 months, that I hate to see groups continue to move the goalpost on this to get it to a point to pass. I felt like when we, out of committee, I think it even passed unanimously out of committee, I felt like most people had a good feeling about it, reached the conclusion it was the right direction for us, and had addressed those issues as best we could to get everybody, again, comfortable with it, even though it may not be the perfect policy for those groups. So I would certainly add that to make sure that we don't spend, it's time just to get something passed as well. And so I think that we've had that dialogue and discussion and are probably at a point to just take action on something, would be my preference.
Thank you. Councilman Schreiber?
I agree that it's time for us to move on with this. It goes beyond just the 2.5 years. We were talking about it years ago when I was chairman of the Preservation Commission. One thing that I can say is that even though the Preservation Commission hasn't had the final say, I think that they've been very fair over the years with the members that they've had, in being very fair with individuals whenever they came and brought it before them, asking that a structure be torn down, even though that commission had no authority basically to stop it. It would be delayed for just a period of time. But you would see that if you go back and reviewed the request, that the commission was very fair in allowing people to remove their properties, tear them down, whatever. Also, in dealing with the last item on there with plans for preservation of fixtures and elements, case in point was the old Dick's home, where Dick's nursery was. That's one I specifically remember. When that was going to be torn down, it was requested that there be consideration given to the fixtures and various architectural elements of that particular structure. And so the individuals that had obtained the structure agreed to do that. So that doesn't necessarily mean that those items obviously would stay with the structure, but it means that they would be preserved and perhaps used by some other entity in a like architectural circumstance or building. So I think that I think the language is good for the most part, and I think that it is time that we made a decision because this has gone on and it can go on and on and on, and we've kicked the can far enough.
Thank you. Councilwoman Ward?
I agree with your comments. I would like to address Councilman Hussey's comments regarding the years. Historic preservationists want to stick with the 50-year mark, due to the Department of Interior's regulations and what they look at. And then we did move it to 100 and worked it through Public Works. But it was recommended from Public Works to let P&Z look at it too, because it became the tiered review process where it involved land clearance, so it became, you know, a zoning issue too. And they strongly recommended to lowering that to 75. There were a couple members that were very adamant that we need to start protecting our historic structures in our city, and I, you know, even though I would like to see the 50 mark, I'm happy that we're discussing at least the 100 mark, but I think the 75 mark would be a good place to strive for. Like I said, I'm very excited we even have it at the table. In regards to plans for salvaging historic items out of these structures, I think you'll find that those that are wanting to remove a historic building, that they are very open to people contacting them for you to salvage through them. You just need permission, and you might need to sign a waiver like I did a couple weeks ago on 6 properties. And all of the items that I was able to salvage out of 4 1920 bungalows have been taken to be used in either properties in town, a property in Salem, Missouri, and also a farm sink that was one of our residents here in town, her aunt's sink. So these items do have meaning, and I think that the language about inquiring about a plan is very doable and feasible in the ordinance. Again, people just feel overwhelmed when they're tasked to tear down something. But if they have a little bit of help and a little bit of insight, I think, you know, an agreement could be met, and some of these historic, if it's not the building, some of the historic items can be saved for future properties. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? All great points brought forward here by council tonight on this ordinance, and also want to thank city staff for working on this and bringing us this version, and also the Historic Preservation Commission. I know there's members, of course, who spoke, and others that are here in the audience this evening, and appreciate the commission members being here. And something else too that I don't remember if you touched on, Mr. Barron, but just the frequency of these items. I think maybe back in May when we did the presentation, it's not a very common thing that these would be even coming to council. It's very infrequent, like maybe even a handful over a matter of years. And I don't remember what the number was, but it was very small and percentage-wise.
So over the past 8 years, I guess we've had about 120 demolition applications go in front of the Historic Preservation Commission. So what about 1 or 2 a month on average? Of those, had 9 applications that the Historic Preservation Commission recommended a denial. So roughly 1 a year is maybe what you could expect. I think that we have heard comments that there are others that maybe they were concerned about but didn't recommend denial because there was real no way to stop it. So, but so maybe 1 or 2 a year.
Sure, that kind of puts it in perspective, and also it puts in perspective the amount of demolition permits that HPC reviews. They spend a lot of effort and time, and that they do take it very seriously and approve most of them, and there's so very few that they deny, so it would be a very rare occurrence. So it's not a very frequent one, but kind of puts that in perspective too. So, all right, seeing no other questions, we'll go on to bill number 2017-106.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, amending Chapter 17, Licenses, Taxation, and Miscellaneous Business Regulations, and Chapter 35, the zoning code pertaining to short-term rental of a residence or lodging room.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As the clerk mentioned, this bill would amend 2 different chapters of the city code, the zoning code and the business regulations, licenses, taxation, miscellaneous regulations pertaining to short-term rentals. And And so short-term rentals is a growing trend across the nation. I think it's largely been spurred by the ease of advertising access with the internet. First, I'd kind of like to describe what a short-term rental is as we're using it in this context. It really pertains to the rental of a residence. So in most cases, it's a single-family home. In some cases, it could be something along the lines of a condominium or a loft apartment, or perhaps a part of a single-family home or one of those things, be it a single room within a residence. And so what a short-term rental is not is a bed and breakfast or other commercial business such as a hotel or something along those lines. And so I know that websites such as Airbnb have been kind of closely linked in people's minds with the short-term rental topic, but many of the things advertised on Airbnb and other websites are bed and breakfast and other commercial uses that really do not this topic does not pertain to. I just wanted to make sure the council understood that for the most part we're talking about single-family homes and other residences, loft apartments and condos and such. And so what this bill would do is define those types of uses within the zoning code. Would establish those types of uses as a special exception use within the residential districts and a permitted use in commercial districts. So what that means is that in the residential districts, again, most of these are single-family homes and single-family districts, the property owner would have to apply for a special exception use permit that would go in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission in a public hearing process. So all their surrounding property owners, their neighbors would get letters in the mail. And the property would be posted with a zoning sign, public hearing sign. They would appear in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission to basically represent their case, and their neighbors and such could obviously comment on it as well. And then from that body, it would proceed to the city council for final review and approval if the council deems it approvable. And then the person could proceed to rent out their home on a nightly basis to the general public, transient guests. Within the commercial districts, they would be able to do that as a matter of right. So where residences happen to be located in commercial districts, in loft apartments and such in the downtown area, be able to rent those out on a nightly basis to transient guests as a permitted use. And so this bill would establish those use allowances within the zoning code, and then also establish a set of specific use standards, so special rules that are applicable to short-term rentals. And so I have them listed here. The top one there is probably the most important in that those uses that require a special exception permit, so generally the ones in the single-family neighborhoods, that permit would be issued in the name of the owner. So the owner would basically have to apply, and if the owner ever sold the property, they would have the new owner could only reestablish the use after reapplying and getting a new permit. So that allows a certain level of review as to the character of the owner. And then also a list of other items there that accessory structures could not be used. There would be a limit on the number of guests, so to basically keep it on the same level as a single-family home. Limited signage, parties and receptions would not be permitted. A parking requirement, again, basically limited or similar to a single-family type of requirement. Making sure that it because these uses by their definition are contained in, are residential in nature, making sure that they maintain a residential appearance. And then also stating that the use would be subject to any applicable taxes and licensing requirements, and also any inspection requirements, particularly pertaining to building and fire code. The building and fire code requirements, I believe it can largely be met, or basically in their entirety be met, by existing adopted codes. So the existing fire code and building code that are adopted would be used to make those administrative decisions on inspection requirements for this type of use. Regarding the taxing and licensing is where the amendments to Chapter 17 come in. And so the bill would amend Chapter 17. There's basically 3 bullet point items there by amending the definitions for short-term or for hotels and motels so that they include short-term rentals. As far as Chapter 17 is concerned, they would all be one category: hotels, motels, and short-term rentals. And then also amending the section regarding lodging tax so that the threshold on where a business is taxed for the number of lodging rooms is reduced from 3 rooms down to a single room. So a person renting their home out as a short-term rental would be subject to lodging tax. And also requiring business licenses for these short-term rental businesses. So a person who only owns one home and is renting out that home on a short-term basis would have to pay lodging tax and also have a business license. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Any questions I cannot answer, I'd be happy to defer to Margie with the finance department or Sunny with my own department.
Thank you, Mr. Barron. And that threshold for the lodging tax, that's 30 days or less, is that correct? Is it, if it's beyond 30, then it's not considered, when you say short-term, you're talking 30 days? Is that the definition?
I'd defer to the finance. As far as the zoning code is concerned, again, the definitions are separated by different chapters of the code, but as far as the zoning code is concerned, the threshold would be 30 days, so that when a person's staying at a place less than 30 days, it's defined as a short-term residence. If it's more than 30 days, it's a long-term residence. How that applies to lodging tax, I'd defer to finance.
Okay. Well, you answered my question. Thank you. Any questions of council? Councilman Fitzwater?
Section in regard to receptions, parties, weddings, I don't have a problem with that, but do we define what a party is so that we don't get into conflicts with neighbors?
If I could defer to law.
There's not a definition of party. And I think that the thought behind that is that police would, of course, be in charge of investigating and enforcing that. And so I think relying on the common definition, which the law states we have to do in absence of our own definition of a party, would allow some flexibility and ability to for the police to address situations as they arise. I think the flexibility in determining what constitutes a party is something that is useful to the police, but certainly understand the ambiguity in that term. So I wouldn't say it's undefined. It's just when a term like that is left without a definition in a regulatory scheme, we rely on the common plain language meaning of the word party. And so I think that provides some flexibility for enforcement to address situations, because whenever you start defining something, people have a ingenious ability to bump right up to that edge of the definition without going over. And so we don't want to put roadblocks in front of our police departments for enforcement where it needs to happen. But, because of a particular definition, it's not quite there.
Any further, Councilman Prather?
Ms. Barron, did I understand correctly that a single housing unit would only be allowed one rental?
So the way it is drafted is that up on the screen under defined short-term rentals, I have 2 bullet points: rental of an entire residence and then also rental of a room within a residence. And so the rental of a room within a residence would be limited to a single room. So you cannot rent out 2 different rooms in the same residence. That's what's contained within the bill. Obviously, if it's the rental of the entire residence, then it's the whole thing. And so,
all right, thank you.
Further questions? And thank you again, Mr. Barron, to staff for working. I know you've worked with some constituents on this ordinance as well, and it seems like a good draft that also protects neighborhoods while also allowing this the short-term rentals in the community. So.
Thank you, Mayor. And I forgot to mention that it was recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission for approval at their I believe it's their October meeting, and is scheduled for a public hearing at the January 2nd City Council meeting.
Great, thank you. Item 12, bills pending. We've already taken up 93. We have 2017-94.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, amending Chapter 19-401 of the Code of the City of Jefferson by the removal of parking prohibited on the east side of South Ridge Drive between Bubba Lane and Sun Meadow Lane.
Mr. Morash?
Thank you. And there's a little glitch in the bill summary. It's actually it's removal of the parking restriction that is currently there off South Ridge, and it's adjacent to the Central Technology offices. They recently redid their parking lot and were allowed to park on the street during that time, and once that was completed, we reviewed the ordinances a couple different times and found that there was a restriction there, and so they requested that restriction be removed.
Thank you. Any questions? Roll call, please.
Henry.
Aye.
Hussey.
Aye.
Kimna.
Aye.
Mahalovich.
Aye.
Prather.
Aye.
Schreiber. Ward.
Aye.
Wiseman.
Aye.
Fitzwater.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Bill passes. Item 13, nothing on the informal calendar. Number 14, resolutions RS 2017-20.
A resolution of the City of Jefferson, Missouri adopting policies and procedures for the 2017 Community Development Block Grant Program.
Mr. Sanders?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is basically, if you think of it as a guidebook to our community development block grant programs. It is designed so the citizens can take a look at what programs we have, what are the qualifications, what are the benefits of them, and even go as far as how someone can complain about part of the process. It is part of our community development block grant program and is a required document that we update frequently. Be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilman Henry?
Actually, Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion for an amendment to this resolution. It initially had the year 2017 on it, and I would just like to replace that with the year 2018.
Okay. So first, should we entertain a motion to take up 2017-20? As
You
amended,
want
or
to
do
take up
need it
take up the amendment first.
the amendment? Okay. So we have a motion and second for the amendment. Any discussion on the amendment? Sounds like it's pretty simple. So all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we will take up resolution 2017-20 as amended. Is there a motion for that?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on the resolution? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Hussey.
Aye.
Kimna.
Aye.
Mahalovich. Prather. Schreiber. Ward. Wiseman.
Aye.
Fitzwater.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Henry.
Aye.
Resolution passes. Item 15, presentations from the gallery on other topics for 3 minutes. And we do have Marianne Reuter signed up. And thank you for your patience this evening. And welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted one last time, just opportunity to speak to the mayor and the city council 2017 regarding the losses my husband and I suffered due to the flood on August 1st of 2016. In May or June of 2016, I called City Hall about a contractor working on the house at 1304, which is next door. He was pitching trash into the drainage ditch behind our house, the same drainage ditch that serves our house. The city sent Mr. Fontana out to look at the situation. He walked along the ditch behind 1304 with my husband and me. He got down into the ditch and he pulled some of the junk out of the ditch and out of the whistle. He sat on the front patio and talked with us for a few minutes. However, nothing changed. The contractor continued his sloppy work. I really think without a permit. I never did see one that was posted. No one came from the city to clean out the drainage ditch, and then came August 1st, 2016. The rains poured, the drainage ditch in the back and the drain in the front that the city had blocked off to keep debris from washing down since they were working on Huff Park Road. Then 5 feet of rushing dirty water roared into our basement to the tune of at least $25,000. My husband and I had to take out a mortgage on our paid-for home in order to get it cleaned and sanitized and livable again. Some of the destroyed items replaced, such as our almost new washer and dryer. Within 2 weeks, my husband was in the hospital with pneumonia. Thank God for our children, or I don't believe either one of us would have survived it. Then to top that off, after attending several council meetings and pleading our case, our lawyer received a letter from Mr. Wolford with the final paragraph reading, and I quote, "Based on our investigation at 1302 Isom Drive," and let me inflict here that the only time to my knowledge anyone was at Isom Drive was a couple of days after the flood, when they brought in big equipment and cleaned out that drainage ditch and pipe. The mayor was there the day of the flood. And continue the paragraph. "The city did not cause, nor was the city aware of any dangerous condition that would have caused your client's loss. We deny any and all liability. I will forward your client's information to our insurer, but I'm certain they will reach the same conclusion." My question to the mayor and to the city council: did Mr. Wolford listen to one word I have told all of you? Did he check any records before sending that letter, as any good lawyer would do, and I've worked for 2 wonderful lawyers in my lifetime? If so, he would have known we had city people out looking at that problem earlier. Several huge rains have happened since then, one within 2 weeks of August 1st. I do believe the ice rink was flooded again that time. We did not have 1 drop of water in our basement once the city cleaned out the drain. Number 1, the city did not clean the drainage ditch after I reported it. Number 2, the city had blockers around the water drains off my front yard, slowing the water drainage. Again, I do not understand why 2 old people who have lived in this house for 48 years, paid our taxes, worked and raised our family here, are being treated as if we did something wrong. We had faith in our city that once we reported a problem, it would be fixed. It wasn't, and we paid dearly for that. So again, in our late 70s, we are paying a mortgage payment out of my retirement and our Social Security. Really makes me admire this city I call home and the people we elect to represent us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Reuter. And I guess I would probably defer some of those questions to Mr. Mullman, and knowing that there's a lawyer in the case, and I'm not sure what litigation there is, so not really sure what we are permitted to discuss at the meeting, but would turn that over to you.
Ms. Reuter has an active claim, certainly potentially pending. I would not make any comment in an open forum on this matter.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any council questions at this point? All right, thank you. All right. Item 16, council and staff discussion of presentation topics. Do we have any discussion this evening? Item 17, any new business? 18, any unfinished business? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And on that motion, I will wish everyone